Hello, and welcome to PhotoTalk. I'm Rebecca Swanson, your host. Sponsored by Professional Women Photographers, better known as PWP, PhotoTalk was created specifically to explore the roles, history, perspectives, and accomplishments of women in today's world of photography. Our guest today is fine art photographer Lori Nix. Working from her home studio, Lori fabricates dioramas from cardboard, foam, glue, and any other material needed, along with backgrounds that she's painted. Some of these dioramas can take up to 7 months to complete. Then using an 8x10 camera, she photographs the scenes. And in this digital age, she uses no Photoshop or other manipulation. Lori has exhibited her work throughout the U.S. as well as internationally. Her work is in the collection of the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, the International Museum of Photography at George Eastman House in Rochester, New York, and the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., among many others. Welcome, Lori.
Hey, thank you for having me here.
Thanks for joining us. This is so much fun.
This is such a pleasure.
Thanks. Thanks. So today we talked about we're going to show two different collections of yours, Accidentally Kansas and The City. So let's start with Accidentally Kansas.
Sure.
What was your inspiration for this collection?
Oh, that was easy. That's basically my childhood of growing up in the rural Midwest of Kansas.
What happened?
Lots of things. lots of inclement weather, you know, in western Kansas, and it seems to be like now in the United States, you know, each season is defined by its weather patterns. And so I've been through blizzards, I've been in tornadoes, hailstorms, droughts, you name it. I've probably experienced it at some point living in western Kansas.
What was your scariest?
A giant windstorm that had come up because it really just like shook the house nonstop. And I just thought we were going to blow away like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
Right,
yeah.
right. But you didn't,
no,
luckily.
No, and my favorite time of the year would be winter because the wind constantly blows in the Midwest, and so the snowdrifts would drift really high against the house, and so as a kid you get to like create little tunnels all throughout the yard because it's at least 4 feet deep. Yeah.
That sounds great.
It was fun as a kid. Not as much as an adult, but it's great for kids.
Right, because you were not snow shoveling.
No, impossible. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about plane.
Okay.
Your photograph plane. This is a bad day on the farm.
Well, you know, growing up in the Midwest, there's not a whole lot to do. I mean, we only had 3 television stations, actually 4, growing up: NBC, CBS, ABC, and then PBS. And TV wasn't all that interesting, really. So I would stay all the time outside. My mom was continuously kicking me and my brother and sister outside to play, and I spent many hours with my on my back in the grass, looking up at the sky and seeing the contrails of planes flying over and wondering, like, you know, who are they? Where are they going? Because they certainly aren't stopping in western Kansas.
Except for this plane.
Except for this plane.
Yeah.
So, you know, growing up in a small town, population 3,500, you are always looking for new and exciting entertainment. It usually happened to be some sort of tragedy that would bring entertainment to our lives, such as the potato truck that crashed on the side of the highway. Or the movie theater. What's the outside movie theaters?
Drive-in theater?
The drive-in theater catching on fire and burning to the ground.
Whoa.
Yeah, so that's like the exciting time. So as a kid, I would think that, gee, I just wish a plane would crash near us, so it would give us something to do. Yeah.
Right, that's funny. So ice storm, well, that's not really a good day.
No, that's exactly how my family is. You know, growing up in the Midwest, we were a station wagon family. And unfortunately these days, you don't get to see it as much because station wagons don't exist, but you remember being at the stoplight, and you could always tell when the family in front of you is having trouble because you can see the father turning around and trying to slap the kids in the back seat, and you can see the station wagon rocking a little bit.
I remember those days.
Exactly. Well, these days, minivans, you don't get to see into other people's cars and see what's going on. And since I did have an older brother and sister, we were constantly at each other's throats, and my dad was always turning around, slapping one of us to quiet down and behave. Right. And so in ice storm, I imagine my family on this icy road in our station wagon. We're acting up. My dad turns around to swat at probably my brother, and turns back around, sees a couple of deer in the road, swerves to miss them, and off into the icy depths of the lake we go.
And that's the end of that.
That's the end of that. Then we're complaining and fighting the whole way down.
I mean, there's just like their impending doom, and they're so funny.
Good, because that is how I deal with adversity and with issues in my life. I like to bring out the humor in all possible avenues.
You definitely do.
Okay.
Insect infestation?
Oh, that was a definite summer event. In the June bugs come out. Pre that, in May, it was always the caterpillars and grubworms. Get into a little bit into August, it's the grasshopper invasion. So this is just in the summertime. I always remember walking through the fields and being stung on the legs by grasshoppers coming up out of the weeds and hitting you. They really hurt when they hit you. And so as an adult, I'm trying to reimagine the insect infestation, and I was working for an art production company, and the only bug that I could find happened to appear on my work table, and it was a giant dragonfly. So the dragonfly takes the place of the grasshoppers in western Kansas or the locust swarms that you might find in Africa. So the dragonfly, even though it's not a treacherous insect, it's a stand-in for just too many in the sky.
Yeah. And
I'm using really interesting, real basic materials here. I have because I don't use Photoshop, I have the dragonflies coming out of the back of my backdrop on a little bit of a bamboo shish kebab skewer. Do you know what you do for the little hibachi when you make shish kebabs? Mm-hmm. And so he's just barely coming out from the background. And I have a feather boa that's supposed to mimic the waving wheat of western Kansas, and these tiny little scale cows that I got at the train store.
Where do you come up with these ideas? I mean, like, do they incubate for a while and you say, how can I create this? If I just use those bamboo skewers, I could have my bugs sticking off of those.
Well, it's just like, I just pick up whatever material's closest to me, and I actually love a good shish kebab, so I have them laying around the apartment just for, homemade shish kebabs. But usually the ideas come to me, now that I live in New York City, they come to me on my morning commute on the subway. Mm-hmm. I'm like barely awake. I've had just enough coffee to get my mind going. I'm sitting in a cramped car with a bunch of strangers, and so I like to escape back into my head. And that's when my brain just goes wild and I start getting my ideas. And if I like it, I'll put it on my cell phone. Mm-hmm. And so I have all my future ideas stored on my cell phone. And then if I still like it after 2 years, 3 years, then I'll start building it. So they do incubate for a while.
Yeah, because, some of these, I don't think the Accidentally Kansas took 7 months to create.
No. These were definitely quicker models to produce. It'd still take a month or 2 months depending on my work schedule, because I've always had a day job. I work by day and I work on these at night and on the weekends, so my building process is a little slower than most.
But you're really prolific. I mean,
it doesn't feel like it, because I only get behind the camera maybe 3 times a year, so I don't feel very prolific at all. Yeah.
But if you go to your website, you have a lot of work. And considering how long these take to make, it's very impressive.
Well, I have help these days. I have an assistant, a full-time assistant, which is my partner, Kathleen. So now there's 2 of us working on these constantly.
I know, you guys just live your work.
Right.
You do.
Our apartment's very messy. Yes.
It's like a tornado went through.
And I have experienced a tornado. I was living in Topeka, Kansas at the time. I think I was in 9th grade, and a tornado ripped right through my neighborhood. My mom specifically, just dropped me off at the local movie theater to see this really bad Disney film called Something Wicked This Way Comes.
I never heard of that one.
It's just an interesting title. It's not a very good one. It stars Jason Robards, but it's an okay Disney movie. But right when it started to get scary, the movie theater comes and kind of interrupts the movie, and it says, "Is there a Lori Nix here?" And I slink out of my chair like an awkward teenager that I was, and I go out into the lobby. People actually booed me as I was leaving because I ruined the movie for them. And my dad was out there pacing, just looking harried, because a tornado had just gone through my neighborhood, and it was all my fault because my mom had just dropped me off at the movie theater. And when she got back to my neighborhood, a tornado was right behind her station wagon and followed her all the way till she hit the driveway. And just growing up in the Midwest, we're always told to roll your windows down. So she rolled the windows down in the car and ducked. And it just demolished the neighborhood. 3 houses down, there was no more house. Yeah.
Wow.
My dad was so mad at me for that.
Right, because it was an act of Lori. It was not an act of God.
I think he was just terrified because his kids were scattered all over the place. I was at the theater, my sister was home with him, my brother was in high school at a track meet. It was just, not the best place for...
Fear does a lot of things to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had fun during the tornado because, a couple days afterwards I was out with my friend looking at all the stuff that had gone missing, and we're in the woods. And I come across a stove, and I open up the stove, and there's someone's dinner in the middle of it. This beautiful ham, perfectly brown, still sitting perfectly in the stove in the middle of the forest.
Wow.
Yeah. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Now that's something that doesn't happen every day.
Tornadoes do weird things to people's possessions.
What about floods?
Flood. Now, I experienced the flood. It was a great flood of 1993. That's how they talk about it in the Midwest. And I was on my way to graduate school. And so I'm living in Missouri. I'm going to grad school in Ohio. And we had such a hard time finding a place to cross the Missouri and the Mississippi River. We had to drive all the way up into the upper reaches of Iowa to find a passable bridge, and then drive all the way down to Ohio. So that was pretty interesting. But it totally devastated where my parents live. Not their side of the city, but the lower western part of the Kansas was just demolished. Yeah.
Wow. Now you moved to New York. We've had 2 hurricanes, and
I feel like I'm a little responsible because we've had tornadoes. It's like, oh my God, we've had tornadoes in Brooklyn, and that's not supposed to happen.
I know.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Sorry, New York.
So hey, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Okay. You mean the mastodon?
Yes, the mastodon. This is from Unnatural History, your collection Unnatural History, right?
Yeah, he made his first appearance in one of my other city scenes called Great Hall, but you can't really see him unless you're really looking for him because he didn't quite make it into the full scene, just his head. But he made a second appearance in this black and white series I'm working on called Unnatural History, which is kind of a spoof on the Natural History Museum where they may have gotten their science a little bit wrong. So here the mastodon is being made out of paper mache rather than a real mastodon.
Yeah, they did not dig this one up.
No. But Kathleen, my assistant, made that. She's just, she's pretty phenomenal. She can take any piece of foam and start carving on it, and voila, within a couple of hours, I've got a finished animal. So she's fearless.
It feels really cool too.
Yeah.
You know,
it's light. It's like, yeah.
Balsa wood?
Basswood, actually, which is a little stiffer than balsa.
It's so cool.
Oh, thank you. He's been living in our apartment for many years now, getting a little beat up as he goes.
Yeah, but he's still around. That's funny. So now let's talk about your city collection. This collection is a little bit less humorous.
Yes.
Than Accidentally Kansas. And why? What happened? But all of these were made in New York?
Yes, I started this series in 2005, and so I'm continually working on it. I think I'm up to 22 images. I think I'm working on number 23 now. And so just being in New York, living in Brooklyn, life getting a little older, life has gotten a lot more serious, right? And so the work has taken more of a serious turn. And it really looks at our city post-mankind. So if you can imagine something tragic happening to the world, and I let the viewer decide what it might be. I don't know if it's going to be like a super virus that wipes us all out, like the flu, or an asteroid that strikes the Earth, or nuclear annihilation. You know, it could be whatever you want it to be, but if you can imagine the city being left overnight, and what I've done is recreate some of these places and just let time deteriorate, take its toll on these places. So you won't find any people in the scenes. You'll find animals and plants. Like some of them, like plants have taken over the spaces. Natural decay or animals. Because I'm thinking, yeah, maybe humans won't survive, but the animals will. That's my hope. Because they really, they're not the ones wrecking the world that we are. Yeah.
Right. Well, in Subway, what's the process? What do you do?
Okay, so Subway, I knew that I wanted to make a Subway. And so the first thing we do is we start going out and getting measurements. Some of these scenes are just made out of the top of my head. Other ones like Subway, I actually can go out and take measurements and really plan this to the T. So Kathleen and I took the B train to the very end, which it terminates at Brighton Beach. And as soon as and we did it at night, and as soon as everybody got off the subway, we immediately got out our tape measure and our point and shoot camera and our notebook. And she's going along and measuring every seat, the width of the car, the height of the car, where the poles hit. And I'm photographing, taking reference pictures the whole time. And we're writing down all of the measurements as we go. And some people are walking by the car and looking at us kind of suspiciously, but I don't think we look too imposing, so they leave us alone, and we just take as many measurements as we possibly can before the train turns around and heads back into Manhattan. And I also photographed her reference, also her standing in the doorway with her, her arms apart to see where the human factor factors into the subway car.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you mathematically scale
Proportioned
it.
it down.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not very good with math, but I figured out some sort of ratio that would give me the proper measurements.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we just started. Then I started buying the supplies I needed, such as aluminum sheet and foam and lots of plastic and more foam, and finally sand.
Well, you didn't buy the sand. Did you go to the beach?
No, actually, I bought
You
the
bought
sand.
sand?
Yeah, I have 300 pounds of sand in my apartment, and I don't know what to do with it now. It's
Take
like,
it to the beach.
I think it's going to have to because I don't know what else to do.
Well, no, in the subway, I mean, it's the metal has decayed.
Mm-hmm.
It's rusty. It's.
And I specifically wanted to make it after the B train because it has the brushed stripes of the train. It's the train that I ride daily, so I could like do even more research just by my commute. And I have fond feelings for the B train.
And in the background, is that a painted background?
That is actually the background is from a model city that I had built earlier, and I photographed it, and then I made a print of it at work, and so it just stuck to the back of the wall. And there's a fog machine going in the background to kind of give the atmosphere, because I want it to look, atmosphere is the hardest thing for me to accomplish in a scale scene. Mm-hmm. That fog or haze that you get when you look out across the city. That's what I'm trying to mimic.
Right.
Yeah.
You do. And we have a shot of Kathleen in the subway.
Yes, most people think that these are really small models. It's like, no, they're actually still quite big. They're just small in relative terms of what a real subway looks like. So I have half a subway car sitting in my apartment. It's still taking up a large chunk of real estate in my apartment, but it's small.
It's like 6 feet long or something, right?
8 feet long. Yeah, 8 feet long and 25 and a half inches wide, maybe a little bit wider, but it's, sits in the back. I haven't dismantled it yet. It's going to appear in a video soon.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Yes.
That sounds fun.
I can't tell any more than that, but it's just going to be part of a video that's going to be very funny.
Vacuum showroom. Where did you get all these little vacuums?
Oh, Kathleen made them. We actually took our point and shoot camera to Walmart and got in trouble for photographing vacuums. But really, you can just go on the internet and Google vacuums and you'll get what you need. And she had a fun time making them. She made them out of horsehair cloth and plaster and aluminum. This scene is one of the fastest ones we've done. We were able to do this in a month because we knew exactly what we wanted. We knew how it wanted to look, and we had a lot of fun doing it. And I think it shows in the posters on the wall. I love how advertising always mimics high art and fine art. And so these posters that are advertising vacuums are actually based on known works of art, such as Da Vinci's When God Created Man. So instead, the hand of God's coming down and creating the vacuum, so it says it's classic. And there's a one on Magritte, so instead of raining men, it's raining vacuums. And then we have Van Gogh's Starry, Starry Vacuum, which is the vacuum sucking the stars out of the sky. And my absolute favorite one, which didn't make it onto the wall, but it's sitting in the very back, is Vacuum Descending a Staircase from Duchamp.
Your humor definitely comes out in this one.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And you can just like smell the mold and, you just feel these. You just intrinsically feel these.
Well, when I build these scenes, I don't necessarily want to make them specifically New York City identified. So here I was channeling Miami and how hot and humid it gets down there. And so I was really thinking about a Miami setting for my vacuum showroom. So I have the fog machine going to make it that moist, warm feel. Yeah.
It's great. It's really great.
And moldy.
Right, and fast too. Yeah. So here's Kathleen in the.
Yeah, she does all the. She's doing all the detail work. She's placing everything just specifically for my camera. So I already have a camera parked behind, outside the scene that you can see, and she's like placing things in the proper position and moving things ever so carefully for me.
Do you guys draw these? Or, how does your idea? How does it collect?
Well, my drawing skills are horrible. I almost failed drawing as an art student. So I give my ideas, and then Kathleen starts drawing them out, and then I pull the sketchbook away from her and say, no, more like this, even though I can't draw. And then she kind of, because we know each other so well, she's able to discern exactly what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. But we do a lot of our talking over breakfast, usually outside the apartment, so that we can just get a fresh perspective on what we want to achieve.
So is it your idea that you take to her, or does she come to you? And
No, it's always my idea. Yeah, but she has to give me the yay or nay, because we'll be spending 7+ months on it. So
Right.
she's got to want to do it, and I try to make them as interesting for her to do as possible. So she does have a lot of input. She gets to do all the tiny detail work. That's her specialty. I come up with the big idea, I build the walls, I build the architecture, and she does all of the detail work. So she has to like it as well, because she knows what it's gonna be like.
Yeah, it must get really intense. And then, like, does it cause trouble? Like,
No, but we do get tired of working on a particular scene. Like, by the time month 7 rolls around, and you can see the finish line, but you know you have all this little tiny monotonous work ahead of you, it gets a little depressing. So we go through these hills and valleys of depression and anxiety, and then love it, and then hate it. Yeah.
and then it's over and so good.
And then we can't wait to tear the scene down.
So do you ever use elements from one scene to another, or
We'll recycle the floors and the walls, because we just don't want to throw everything away. We're sensitive about recycling as much as possible, but rarely do we get to use anything beyond that. Again, I might use some of the decorative elements later, but it might end up appearing in the black and white scene instead, which from this series of work.
and Botanic Garden?
That was fun.
That looks fun.
That was, well, I live across the street from the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, where I live catty corner, so I was there a couple times a week, just enjoying it, looking at the plants, photographing it. And then I took my point and shoot around New York City and would just photograph interesting leaves, and then isolate them in Photoshop, and then print them out on my little crappy color laser printer at home, and then build the plants all over again. I'd glue some wire on the background, twist them together, and create my own plant form. So most of those plants are made of paper.
What about the cyclamen? Is that real, or
Which one?
The big leaf?
Oh no, that's not real. That's still.
You made that too?
Yeah, the only thing that's real in there is the dead leaves from our apartment from other house plants. Everything else is either plastic or paper. Yeah. And this scene confused my cats. Something awful, because I'd come home and they'd be laying in the middle of it because they thought they were back out in nature when they haven't ever left the apartment, ever.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
How nature is so deeply instilled in us.
Yeah, so I was always finding the cats in the middle of the scene. And this was a really large scene.
Yeah, we have an image with Kathleen building. What is that metal? That is the arch?
Oh, the arch is made out of gator board and another building material called task board that I love to use. But it's all lightweight material, so it's gator. Yeah.
So you can pick these up and carry them around if you need to.
Right. Yeah. And we're also carrying stuff home on the subway. We'll pick up art supplies in Manhattan and carry it home. So it has to be portable and light. Yeah. And she's standing on top of a table, so she's worried about falling through the table. Yeah. That's why she's up there.
You studied ceramics in
I did.
at college.
Yeah.
And how does that translate?
Oh, I'm just really comfortable working with my hands. Yeah, I have no problem. I can see in 3 dimensions. I can work in 3 dimensions. Give me a knife, give me a pencil, give me some clay, no problem. But Kathleen is better at sculpting than I am, and I'm better at measuring and cutting. Yeah, but it's been great.
So this is what, Kathleen's Hand and Beauty Shop?
Yes. So this is Beauty Shop. This is one of the smaller scenes as far as the city goes. It was about 18 inches wide, maybe 25 inches deep. And this is considered dollhouse scale, which is 1 to 12. And that kind of just gives an idea of how small the scenes are. The previous scene, she was standing in the middle of it, and this one, her hand is sneaking through the scene. So we don't work in just one scale, we work in various scales all the time. Yeah. It would be smarter if we just worked in one scale, but we aren't that smart.
But it doesn't work. I mean, sometimes you can't get things that you want in a certain size.
No, and the way we go about working with the whole city series is we try to build and fabricate as much of the materials as possible ourselves. But every once in a while, there's something that we may not want to make, and we'll buy that as either a toy or a dollhouse miniature, and then use that to scale the rest of the scene. Yeah.
There's your cat.
That's my cat. Cats love to be in the middle of the artwork.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And I let them roam. They eat things, they vomit, and then they go back down on the floor. But they love being right where I want to work. They love sitting on my knives. They like playing with my pencils. And so, but now they're getting old enough that they don't jump up on the scenes as much.
That would be sort of bad for them to like start eating your mastodon or, you know.
Oh yes, some interesting things have come out the backside of my cat. But let's not talk about that.
You know, I love library because you've got these trees growing in the library.
Yeah, and this is by far everyone's favorite image. And I spent the entire summer just making books out of foam.
Wow, those are not.
No, they're individual books. They don't open like a book would, but they're definitely individual pieces of books. And I just have bags and bags and bags of them. But it took me an entire month just to make just the books. And so it was a very contemplative, very monotonous approach to work. But that's how I like to, you know, that's the kind of work I like to do, repetitive.
Wow.
And Kathleen fabricated the tree for me. So that's part real tree and then a lot of fakeness to it as well. And we bought the globe, and that kind of set the scale for the rest of the scene.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You know what? Unfortunately, we're completely out of time.
Really?
Yes. And what I'd like to do is thank Manhattan Neighborhood Network, our sponsor, Professional Women Photographers, and of course, Lori Nix. You're fabulous.
And thank you
You're
for having
amazing.
me here.
Thank you. So until next time, this is PhotoTalk.